44. And LBC weather, a mostly dry and breezy morning in London and the southeast. Sunny spells, but also the odd shower moving in from the west through the afternoon. Highs of 9 degrees. A similar outlook across the UK with heavier rain and thunder for the west and for the northwest. LBC News Time, it's 3 minutes past 9.
And as you join us, it's Dave Smith from Leeds out in front of his wife Sue. He's round the kitchen table passing Fluffy the cat, who's looking tired. Dave in the living room now, moving smoothly past the sofa, leaving it standing still. Really turning on the power now as he switches on his computer. Seconds away now. And yes, he's done it. That is the Sainsbury's Sport Relief Games successfully entered online in no time. Run, swim or cycle at the Sainsbury's Sport Relief Games from Friday the 21st to Sunday the 23rd of March. Enter today at sportrelief.com.
I'm Ed McCall in the LBC Travel Centre. Still a very busy Friday morning. M25 clockwise. Issues about half a mile before junction 4 to Orpington. It's just the outside lane, lane 3 open after a lorry caught fire earlier on. Delays still back to Dartford at junction 1B. Congestion with the Rotherhithe Tunnel, partially blocked by a car that's broken down. Northern stretch of the M25. Delays anti-clockwise into the roadworks from Waltham Abbey round towards Potters Bar, 26 and 24, and clockwise 22 and 23. That's London Coney round towards South Mews. Oxfordshire, the A34 still shut going south between the Marcham and Milton interchanges. It's from investigations after a serious accident. Delays back towards the Abingdon North turn. Tricky conditions on parts of the M6 through Cumbria because of snowfall. And for the trains, no Northern Rail services between Hexham and Newcastle. Keeping you moving. Next travel update is in 15 minutes.
LBC Travel
with gotomeeting.co.uk. Fast, easy online meetings. Go online for a free 30-day trial.
This is LBC, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call 0845 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Good morning, 5 minutes after 9 on Friday, February the 21st. Listeners are hanging on every word. The Westminster world is watching and waiting, and Twitter has been in near meltdown. Will he or won't he, Nigel Farage, UKIP leader, pick up this challenge from Nick Clegg?
If Nigel Farage is either listening or looking at
Indeed,
this,
yes, we've got those
at this programme, I hope he would take up my challenge to debate once and for all publicly: should we be in the European Union, which I believe means that we have more people in work would otherwise be the case. We keep ourselves safer because we can go after cross-border crime and terrorism. It means that we can look after the environment in the way that we can't on our own. Or do we do what UKIP want, which is to pull ourselves out of the European Union and so jeopardise millions of jobs in this country? That's the choice. Let's have the debate out in the open, and I'm very happy and very keen to debate that with Nigel Farage directly.
And prior to hearing his response, can I urge you, never play poker with Nigel Farage. His face has not moved an inch. I have no idea genuinely what he's about to say. He's in the studio now. UKIP leader Nigel Farage, yes or no?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, you're an experienced broadcaster, Nick. What do you think I'm going to do?
I hope you're going to say yes.
Do you know, I nearly choked on my bacon roll when I heard Nick Clegg say he wanted to have a debate about the big European question, because this was the guy 3 years ago advocating an in-out referendum who now says there shouldn't be a referendum, but now wants a debate. So he's all over the place. I've thought about this overnight, and, do you know, the reason I got into politics, because I was working in the city, I was working in the commodities business, and I got involved in politics because I felt on this great question of who governs our country, our own parliament, by the men and women we elect and send there, or the European Commission and the other institutions in Brussels, that we weren't having a proper talk about this. And I've battled on for 20 years. I've been laughed at, ridiculed, attacked, but at no point in the 15 years that I've now been an MEP, at no point have we ever had a full national debate about the merits or demerits of EU membership. And therefore, when the Deputy Prime Minister says he wants to go public and have a debate with me on this issue, I have absolutely no choice. I've got to say yes, because we need to have a national debate on what I think is the most important issue this country has faced for hundreds of years in terms of our constitution. So the answer is yes, but with one small caveat. I do really want for the Labour Party in the shape of Ed Miliband and the Conservative Party in the shape of the Prime Minister to join this debate as well. So the answer is yes, I'll do it with Nick Clegg, but the other two, I would like to see them there as well.
What if they say no?
They will say no. In fact, Downing Street have already briefed. They said that David Cameron was too busy running the country. Well, running probably is the right word. But actually, Mr. Cameron, that's what the debate's about. Who is running the country? Are you running it? You know, as the Prime Minister, who goes to the House of Commons once a week, or is EU Commissioner Viviane Reding right when she said in London last week that over 70% of our laws are now made in Brussels? I suspect that David Cameron does not ever want to have this debate. I think the splits in the Labour Party between New Labour and Old Labour over the European question have been highlighted by open-door immigration, which hasn't just put lots of our youngsters out of work, it's led to wage compression. You know, talk to working people about what's happened to their salaries in the last 5 or 10 years. So I suspect that they don't want to have the debate. So if it's Nick Clegg and I head-to-head, then let's have the debate.
It's on. The LBC debate. We want to invite the other two. We'd love to have the other two. But if they say no, you've got the nerve, you're ready to go to take on Clegg on the LBC debate.
I can hardly wait.
Let's get straight to the calls. Thank you, Nigel Farage. Charles is in Tottenham. You're through to the UKIP leader. Go ahead, Charles.
Hello, Nigel.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Now, one thing I want to put to you, Nigel, and it's always bothered me about... one time you're a sceptic. It's always bothered me about one thing with you. And that is, Nigel, do you really think that you can improve things in Europe? Do you really think that we can keep the 3 million jobs that are in this country? And Nigel, are you not just a party of protest?
Do I think we can improve things in Europe? No. No, of course we can't. You know, here we've got Cameron, Miliband and Clegg saying, oh, well, of course we've got to reform it and make it better and make it more democratic. Not a cat's chance in hell. You know, I'm off to Strasbourg on Monday. I will sit next Tuesday morning in a debate with the Commission President, my great friend, Mr. Barroso, and his version of reform and the German Chancellor's version of reform and the French President's version of reform is yet more power to the centre. So the idea that we're somehow going to turn around this European ship, frankly, you know, you may as well drink moonshine. It isn't going to happen. Now, the 3 million jobs, this is really interesting. Because
this is the number Nick Clegg say Britain could, just
right.
Remind the listeners, could lose if we came out of the EU.
Actually, Cameron and Miliband say it as well. They say that 3 million British jobs are dependent on our membership of the European Union. And the argument is, if we weren't in political union, they wouldn't buy our widgets. That's what it really comes down to. There'd be a trade war against us, and we wouldn't be allowed to sell a single product to the European Union. It presupposes that you have to be in a political union to buy and sell goods from each other, which of course you don't in any other part of the world. We are covered by international rules, the World Trade Organization. Indeed, we're also signatories to the European Economic Area, separate to our membership of the European Union. So we're covered by a series of international trading rules that say they would not put huge tariffs on our goods. But let me tell you the real reason why 3 million British jobs are not under threat, and it's this. We have become now the biggest export market in the world for Germany. They sell more to this country than they sell to America or Japan or China or anywhere else. German car manufacturers would never allow the German Chancellor to enter into a trade war with Britain when they're selling us far more than we're selling them. We have a trade deficit annualised at over £40 billion a year. The truth is, they need us more than we need them. And actually, people like Nick Clegg seem to think that politicians create business. They don't. Business is created by consumers who say, I want that product, I like the price, I trust its reliability. So we will go on doing business uninterrupted with the European Union, but able then to make our own trade deals with other parts of the world, which we're currently forbidden from doing. And let's not just think of trade in terms of Europe. Let's recognise we're part of a global economy, and let's get Britain out of political union and into the real world.
And let's get to more calls. Robin's in Herne Hill. Robin.
Hello, yes, Nigel. I'm hoping to be a local candidate in the local elections this May, and also hoping to get through the difficult PPC process. But one thing I don't want to be doing is defending a prospect or holding out a prospect of a coalition and debating that instead of debating UKIP policies. Secondly, I want to know about the manifesto, because I'll be tested on the 2010 manifesto. And
I know all about that.
I'm impressed with Mark Quinlan. He strikes me as a person who will get through the the bump that we don't want another 468.
Well, what's your direct question? Your direct question then, Robin, is what?
Well, news on the manifesto and no to any coalition with the political class who have failed the country for the past 40 years.
Well, I endorse those sentiments entirely. I'm not having this debate as a precursor to thinking about coalition. I'm saying yes to this debate because it's about time the British people actually had a proper debate on this. Because, you know, the entire political class, as you call them, you're quite right, all support Britain's continued membership of the Union. They've tried to keep UKIP and UKIP views out of the media for years and years and years. So here's our chance to talk about the issues. On the UKIP manifesto, look, you know, in 2010, under Lord Pearson, I was presented with a 16-page manifesto, which I read and thought, well, that's pretty sensible, and I signed it. Unbeknown to me, 486 pages of policy notes had appeared on the UKIP website under the heading Manifesto. I disavowed that nearly 2 years ago when I came...
You did speak at the manifesto launch, though, didn't you?
For the 16-page document, completely unaware that hundreds of pages of what in many cases, I mean, I've called it drivel the other week. I mean, some of it was, some of it wasn't. But I was unaware of that, and it was a mistake, all right? It was a mistake that a party that had hardly any staff working for it centrally made. So let's have no confusion about it. We had a proper manifesto in 2010. We should not have had a nearly 500-page, almost War and Peace document tied round our necks.
Herbie is in Harrow. You're on the radio through to Nigel Farage. Herbie.
Good morning, Nigel.
Good morning.
Well done, you, and well done, LBC, for bringing this debate to life.
Quite right, absolutely.
And I'm so pleased that you've now done it, and I'm glad you've taken the challenge up, Nigel, because now the other two monkeys will have to come and do the same.
We shall wait, and the invitation is to those two monkeys.
I'll have a fiver, Herbie, that they don't, all right?
Karen's on Jersey. Karen, you're on the radio.
Oh, good morning, Mr. Farage.
Good morning.
What I'd like to ask you is, how can the UK leave the European Union without signing up to Article 50, which Article 50, as you know, in the Lisbon Treaty, it takes 2 years to leave. Now, surely a simple, straightforward Act of Parliament by means of the European Communities Act, scrapping that, could, from 1973, that could actually... let us leave the European Union much faster.
Well, you know, you've just outlined two approaches to this, and both have valid arguments behind them. It's just a question of how we want to do this. And my view is that I think we need to show the world, and we also need to show our own electorate and our businesses, that we're going to do this in a very responsible way, that we're not doing this because we're anti-European in any sense at all. In fact, I feel personally very pro-Europe. I love Europe. I think it's a great place. What I don't like is the European Union and the idea that all these different countries should be merged. The Lisbon Treaty is the law of this land. It makes me very angry that our Prime Minister gave a cast-iron guarantee to give us a referendum on it and then didn't do it. But it is the law of the land. And Article 50 offers us a means where we enter into a negotiation with no threat to our trade position at all. So even Mr. Clegg can't say that going into the Article 50 process threatens 3 million jobs. So my view is that we use the existing treaties, we invoke Article 50 as quickly as possible, but we make it clear that unless they play fair with us, we will not continue with that process. It has to be a fair, sensible debate. The legislation states up to 2 years, but I would have thought we could get this sorted out very much more quickly than that. And I'll tell you something.
Up to 2 years to get out?
Up to 2 years to do all the negotiations to get out.
You think you could fast-track that?
I'm certain we could fast-track it, because actually it's the only mechanism, Nick, that exists within the European treaties to have this debate. You know, if you want to renegotiate, the only way to do it is to invoke Article 50 effectively. And I think it would be better for us to potentially spend a few months getting the kind of trade deal with our European neighbours right and making sure that we part on amicable terms. That, to me, is the right approach. But, having said that, the other approach of effectively just saying, right, that's it, I mean, that's, equally legally valid, but I think we should just show the world that we are responsible people.
Some emails, texts and tweets coming in. Tracy in Hertfordshire, I'm delighted Nigel has said yes, but can he explain why the people in Ukraine are protesting, and indeed some of them are dying because they want to get into Europe and we want to get out?
Well, it's not so much wanting to get into Europe, it's wanting to get away from Moscow. I remember going to the Baltic states when they had referendums on joining the European Union just over 10 years ago. And I remember a chap in Estonia saying, "Look, Nigel, your arguments are very valid, but we want to say goodbye Moscow and goodbye forever." And they've seen the European Union, and don't forget NATO, as a means of getting away from Russia. I just wonder how the Prime Minister feels this morning about the Ukraine, because when he became Prime Minister, he said he wanted the Ukraine to become members of the European Union and members of NATO. And I have to say that I think our knowledge of the Ukraine and Chechnya and all these countries is pretty limited. We're witnessing the breakup of the old Soviet empire, and I think we should be very careful about not getting too deeply involved.
Terry's in Croydon. Terry.
Hi. Just a thought. If Scotland vote yes for independence, they will effectively be voting to leave the EU. Just how many jobs do you think are in jeopardy in Scotland if they leave the EU?
It's a really funny one because this is a very odd debate, isn't it? Because Salmond has been calling for independence from Westminster, and yet he wants to be part of the European Union. So it isn't really an independence referendum at all. Salmond also wanted them to join the euro. Now he says he wants to keep the pound. So the whole debate in Scotland has been terribly confused as to what the word independence really means. Now, what you've had in the last week is my old mucker, Mr. Barroso, coming to London and saying to the Scots, the Salmond proposal of them joining the EU, having left the UK, may not work. All that was happening there is that Barroso was doing the political class in Westminster a favour and, doing his best to help them in their campaign for Scotland not to leave the United Kingdom, but to stay in the European Union. So I think it's, and frankly, I think that Salmond's arguments now on the economy have become so weak. And I think the most devastating figure for Salmond really in the last 2 weeks hasn't been all the big theatre over threats as to what may happen and what may not happen. But we're beginning to see financial services companies relocate from Edinburgh to London. And you might have noticed that the North Sea oil production figures were the lowest since 1977. So Salmond's idea that somehow they're all going to be rich if they break away from Westminster, I think that's beginning to fall. My feeling is that, the Salmond yes vote is not going to succeed. But there will be an ongoing debate about devolution within this country. And I think the English are going to start to want to have their say. Because I think the English are getting a pretty rotten deal out of all of this. And I think in the end, 5 or 10 years down the road, we will have a federal structure within the United Kingdom, and we won't have Scottish MPs voting on English education and issues like that.
Chris is in Guildford. You're through to Nigel Farage. Chris.
Hello, morning Nick, morning Nigel. Congratulations, well done for taking up the challenge.
Did you ever doubt it? Did you ever doubt it, Chris?
Well,
he's a born fighter, this man.
You just never know with politicians. They just seem to skip round.
I'm a politician now. You've really hurt me.
That was a compliment. I'm certainly for leaving the euro. My biggest concern is the corruption within the European Union. My question to Mr. Farage is, exactly how would he get us out of the Union when the previous caller just said that it could take up to 2 years? I understand that it could be a slow process, but what exactly is he prepared to do to get us out of this European Union and keep Britain as a whole a trading country?
I think I made it clear to the last caller that there is an article in the treaty that allows us immediately to enter into a renegotiation of our relationship post-Britain leaving the European Union. And I think we should invoke that article and head down that legal treaty-based route. If, a short way down that road, the people in Brussels start behaving badly and start trying to move the goalposts, then we will have to do whatever it takes to get back our democracy and our independence. But I think we go into this with an open, friendly spirit, saying we wish to use this piece of legislation to get a new deal.
All right, thank you for that. Let's go to some more of the tweets and texts and emails. Chris, thank you for your call. Sue in West Kingsdown, taking you into other matters. Nick Clegg says that he will want to stay in or opt in the NHS Care.data programme. What would Nigel Farage do? Mr Farage, are you aware of this? This is this giant NHS database, and you have to opt out, whereas in Scotland you have to opt in for your records, and there are concerns about the security, and it's been put back for at least 6 months. Nigel Farage?
I don't trust any of these giant databases, whether it's the National Health Service or even the driving licences in Swansea that have been sold off to all sorts of different private companies. And I think that to expect people to be opted in unless they want to opt out is quite a serious invasion potentially of their privacy.
So you would not want to be in it?
No.
OK. Bruce in Brighton said, I attended a public meeting with Janice Atkinson, who's a UKIP MEP, in February at Portslade Town Hall in Brighton. She said it will take 5 years to get out of Europe, and she also said UKIP MEPs are not actually elected to go to the EU Parliament and vote, but to protest. Do you know this lady, Janice
I do.
Atkinson?
I certainly do, yes. And she's one of the growing number of women that's going to be elected for UKIP on May the 22nd.
Well, she won't go to... If Bruce is right, what's the point?
I very much doubt she said that. She certainly wouldn't have said it would take 5 years, that's for certain. And in terms of what UKIP MEPs do, look, our job as UKIP MEPs is not to be there 5 days a week. I mean, as we speak, Nick, there are people in Brussels signing a register, right, which gives them €300... tax-free, and then they'll be on the 11 o'clock Eurostar back to London. You know, I mean, that's how it works over there. Our job is not to be there 5 days a week. Our job is not to go native. Our job is to be there enough to participate in debates or committees if appropriate, but our priority is what we can do in this country to try and get a proper national debate going. And I've been doing that for 15 years. I've been an MEP for 15 years, but my priority is what happens in this country, not what happens in Brussels. And I tell you what, the fact that Nick Clegg wants to, said yesterday on LBC that he wants to have a national debate about EU membership says to me that we've actually used the right strategy.
So you don't think your candidate would say, we are not elected to go there and vote?
I think that's taken out of context. You know, we do go there, we do vote, but we're not there 5 days a week, and that's the point.
Noah's in Swansea. Noah, you're through to Nigel Farage.
Hello, Nigel.
Good morning.
I just want to say, although I have no doubt that you would eviscerate Nick Clegg in a debate on the European Union, you should have held out for a better deal. I wouldn't have agreed to the debate unless I'd had a written cast-iron guarantee from all the major party leaders and the national broadcasters that you would be part of the leaders' debates next year in the run-up to the general election.
I did think about that. Of course, excuse me laughing when you mentioned cast-iron guarantees, because we've had a few of those go rusty over the years. I thought about that, and you know what I think? I think if this works, and I see no reason why it shouldn't work, and if it engages a very large number of people in these European elections and in politics, then I think it makes it more likely that next year, for the general election, that everybody has to be involved. So I see this as being a step towards the same thing on a bigger scale happening next year.
Do you think you will be in that leaders' debate next year?
Well, I don't think they want me to be.
Do you think they will eventually buckle?
I think that depends on UKIP's progress. You know, we've had...
what would you need to do in how many days, Mr. Clegg?
Well, we've got 91 days to the European elections.
91.
I'm ticking them off every morning.
Yes, I know you
and I'm on best behaviour for 91 days. Look, I mean, if UKIP can achieve in those European elections what I believe potentially is possible, and that is that we actually win a national election, if we do that, how can they possibly keep us out of the leaders' debates next year?
OK. They'd have arguments, I'm sure. Nick's in Chelmsford. You're on the radio. Nick.
Hi. Morning, Nigel.
Good morning.
I was reading that the EU environmental policies might have actually prevented us from putting in some of the flood defences that were needed in this country. Do you think that's true? And do you think it's worth trying to get some aid from the environment, from the EU for helping us to get over the flood problem?
What is certain is that virtually every aspect of our lives is now governed by European Union directives. And increasingly it appears that what the Environment Agency have been doing is fulfilling a series of EU directives that place the interests of beetles, molluscs and water voles above that of farmers and householders, all right? And dredging is the best example. You know, the silt that you dredge, which I think since the ancient Egyptians has been considered to be some of the most fertile soil that you can put on farmland, is now effectively industrial waste under EU law and costs a fortune to remove, and we've been dredging less. I am not saying that the floods are all Mr. Barroso's fault, but I am saying that the floods happened earlier and happened with a greater intensity because it would appear of the working methods of the Environment Agency. What I want is a proper public inquiry, and I want to ask the question, just as I want to debate with Nick Clegg who governs Britain, I want to ask who tells the Environment Agency what to do. And let's find out to what extent these have been EU directives. In terms of the the damage caused to people. Well, I've been both to Somerset and to parts of Surrey and seen how these people are suffering. I have to say, for my own part, last weekend, again, we had no electricity. That's the second time in 6 weeks that with storm damage at home on the North Downs.
Down in Kent, you lost all
power
again.
But, I mean, look, you know...
you lost it over Christmas?
Yeah, I lost it over Christmas, cracked chimney, roof tiles, all the fencing gone. So I've suffered a bit during these storms, but that's nothing compared to being flooded for week on end. And if we were to apply to the European Union to get some of our own money back from them, right, they would give it back to us, but take it off the rebate. And that's why Cameron hasn't applied. And I just think the cleanest and best way of dealing with this is to say, you know, what has happened has been a really deeply unpleasant experience for thousands of people. There are farmers and householders whose insurance policies will not fully compensate them for what's happened. And why don't we just take a very small percentage of the overseas foreign aid budget, which, if you think about it, is charitable giving anyway, and why don't we use that money at home to compensate people and work on the basis that actually charity begins at home?
Which bit would you take, Mr Farage, of the overseas aid budget?
Well, there's £11 billion a year going in overseas aid, and about £2 billion of it goes on what you and I would call genuinely humanitarian causes, providing clean water, providing inoculations.
Some of it goes to contraceptive clinics in Malawi.
Well, yeah, and we're sponsoring dance troupes, and, I mean, goodness knows what it gets. And we're giving money to countries that have got aircraft carriers with planes on them, and space programmes and nuclear programmes. We're even loaning money to Argentina, who don't like us very much. I mean, the whole thing's crazy. It seems the foreign aid budget is now used as a political weapon, and I think it needs a serious reappraisal.
We've got about a minute left. One email and one call. This comes from Rachel in Hastings. Nick Ferrari was doing the story about the immigrant sex gang. What would happen to them under UKIP? Now, you may not know about this, Nigel Farage.
I do, yeah.
You do. These are the 4 people from Czech Republic and Slovakia, paedophiles, rapists, sentenced for a number of years, and possibly when they come out, they get to stay here.
Of course. Of course.
And what would happen with you? What should happen?
Two things should happen. Firstly, we should be able to refuse people entry at the border, which we currently cannot do under European Union rules if they come from those countries. And secondly, anybody that comes to this country from overseas and breaks the law goes.
What level of transgression?
Well, I'm not suggesting, you know, doing 34 and a 30 would qualify, but I mean, any serious
20 years for child rape.
Anybody that commits a proper criminal offence, a serious criminal offence, goes immediately. And I also feel, you know, that you should, if you want to come to this country to work and then to settle, I think you should be here for up to 5 years before you qualify for the benefits system. And again, if you transgress in those 5 years, you go. You don't qualify.
Godfrey, last call. King's Cross. Godfrey, you're through to Nigel Farage.
Hi, morning, Nick. Morning, Nigel.
Hello.
Just a quick one. What would happen to people like me if the UK would leave the European Union? I'm an immigrant. I live for 4 years in this country. I pay all the tax. I have a baby here.
Where are you from, Mayor? This is Nick Ferrari, by the way.
Lithuania.
You're from Lithuania.
Well,
Nigel Farage.
I mean, I'm not suggesting for a moment that we would say to people who came here legally they couldn't stay here anymore. You know, I don't believe in retrospective law ever under any circumstances. So you have come here legally, and from the sounds of it, you're working hard and paying taxes and bringing up a family, and that's good. However, we have let too many people in from overseas, and this is not directed at you personally, but we've let too many people in from overseas. It's led to a completely distorted labour market, and we need very, very rapidly to say that in future, our immigration policy and our work permit scheme will be done on a selective basis to make sure that British people are getting a fair crack.
But Godfrey himself is safe with his wife and lovely baby.
We're not retrospectively going to change the law.
Lastly, Nigel Farage, you always have a spring in your step. You seem to have even more of a spring in your step. You're looking forward to the debate?
I'm looking forward to the debate. I've had a couple of months of my health perhaps not being as good as it ought to have been, and major surgery, and I think I'm coming through the other end of that. And I have spent years being told that I'm a nutcase, that, you know, the arguments that UKIP stands for aren't valid. And yesterday on your show, the Deputy Prime Minister challenged the fruitcakes and all the other terms of abuse that have been thrown at us to engage in a national debate. I'm delighted.
Do you know it was on my show that Cameron called you fruitcake?
I know it was. Well, there you are.
We seem to have a history.
Absolutely.
You heard it here first. It's on. Nigel Farage has accepted the challenge. It's Nick v Nigel. Nigel Farage, thank you.
Thank you.
News follows this.
Good morning, I'm Lisa Aziz. UK Independence Party leader Nigel Farage has accepted Nick Clegg's challenge of a public debate on LBC